one of the reasons I answered it, said at the back end. While this work is going down, I also said to the leadership, and I said to all the officers, people are going to rely on you to provide that public safety, and you need to continue to do that. The most important thing you need to do is do your job well and do it professionally, as you have been trained to do, and I'm not saying just policing, community policing. Okay?
Mr. Mayor.
And then I'll just go down. I apologize. And then I'll go to the side. I apologize.
Two questions about credibility and legitimacy. The documents dumped late Friday night raised more questions than answers about what has gone on in the McDonald investigation to you and to Superintendent Escalante. First, Superintendent Escalante, how could you have approved the Department of Detectives report in March of this year, which cleared Van Dyke of any wrongdoing, cleared, closed, found to be consistent with the attack accounts of the witnesses, all the videotape. The videotape consistent. We know now from reading those reports that the officers' accounts were not consistent with the videotape. You were the head of detectives back then. How could you have approved that report? And to Mr. Mayor, that report was approved in March. Less than 30 days later, your administration agreed to pay $5 million to the McDonald family. If Van Dyke was cleared, why would you pay $5 million unless you knew something else? I'd like both answers.
You want to go first and then I'll go? Sure.
So two parts of my answer to that question. Number one, we recognize that there is a problem in the sense that there is no formal review process that goes up the chain of command for a police-involved shooting. So we, as of today, instituted what is going to be a more formalized process that will review each police shooting that will actually come up the chain. So without trying to pass the buck, I understand your question. There actually was never anything for me to sign off on, but we're changing that so that there will be as we move forward.
You saw something. You saw the video. You saw the witness reports. You realized they were at odds. Why didn't you do something?
That's the second part of my answer. So in that report, there is still a criminal investigation that has to be done, separate from the use of force investigation which is done by the Independent Police Review Authority. If you look at the statements that the officers gave, particularly Officer Van Dyke, as in any investigation where there is a criminal investigation being conducted by detectives, they took the statements that Officer Van Dyke made, literally his statements as they were, what he saw, what he perceived, and why he fired. There was no attempt to alter his statements. That's what he said. That is why when the video showed that his statements did not match the video, he was charged with murder. There was no attempt to try to get his statements to match the evidence. Quite the contrary. The officers took his statements as they were, and those statements ultimately led to the charging of murder.
When you saw the video a year ago, though, it clearly didn't jive with what your officers were telling you, sir. How did you not...
Let me answer, Ben, Jay's second part. Jay, as you know, and the situation as it relates to the city and the civil piece, the family, as this was noted not only by Steve Patton, it's noted, I wrote about it this weekend, family approached us on the 27th of February. We reached an agreement in principle, I think, in late March, and then took it right to City Council. And those were the procedure.
Could you answer the question? You knew that he was cleared. Why would you pay money if you knew the police department
I think
cleared
if you look at the testimony Steve Patton goes, you'll all the answers are there, and that's what exists there.
Mr. Mayor?
In relation to these reports, some of the officers who weren't involved in the shooting but were on the scene filed reports that were consistent with Officer Van Dyke's testimony. In other cases, IPRA might find these to be a violation of Rule 14 in the department, and with IPRA and the police board, most officers charged with Rule 14 are not fired in Chicago. In other cities, it's lie. If you lie, you die. Do you think that these officers, they're found to be sustained ruling 14, they should be fired, and do you think that there should be a stronger position on lying in the police department for individual officers who aren't involved in shootings?
Okay. There are two parts, if I can. In that question, there are two layers, if I can. Let me deal with the first one. As you know, it's, I think, starting in December of 2014, so about a year ago, the U.S. Attorney here in Chicago has opened an investigation in a civil rights case as it relates to the Laquan McDonald shooting and all evidence, all parties, everything involved in that. As recently as today, the U.S. Attorney's addressed the questions in the sense of that investigation. So I'm not going to prejudge to that particular because it's under an investigation right now. I will say I am as anxious as everybody else for the conclusion of that investigation. As it relates to the general principle of accountability, discipline for officers, there is no doubt that whether you have, and John and I have talked about this, Sharon and I have talked about it, one of the things in the SAFER piece, we have 3 entities. Internal review over at the Police Department, Internal Affairs. You have IPRA, the Independent Police Review Authority, and then you have the Police Board, all trying to accomplish and create a structure of discipline, oversight, a punishment system to hold people accountable when they don't act appropriately. One of the reasons I'm appointing Sharon today is given her background and experience both at the Inspector General's office and then with Patrick Fitzgerald's office and the U.S. Attorney's office that dealt with criminal justice and terrorism, is to reinvigorate and have a level of accountability so officers will be held accountable.
Respectfully, that doesn't answer my question. I'm talking about Rule 14, officers who lie, people who are told to get their story straight. If IPRA in the past has found officers sustained Rule 14 allegations, the superintendent says fire them, it goes to the police board, and they don't even get suspended. That's part of the problem with that. I'm asking you about that.
You've addressed my very concern, which is one of the reasons I've asked this task force to look at the fact you have 3 entities all supposed to be doing something, and it's not happening. That's one of the things that I've charged this task force that Lori Lightfoot, Sergio Acosta, Joe Ferguson, Randolph Stone, and High is all on, is to look at the fact that you have 3 entities, and if people are not telling the truth but don't believe they believe there's a permissive culture that enables that rather than hold them accountable, we have a problem because people won't trust it. That's exactly one of the reasons I've asked the task force to go work.
What do you say to those people in Chicago who are now questioning your leadership and your accountability and your credibility?
No. Well, look.
What do you say to people who think you're part of the problem, Mr. Mayor? How do you answer that?
One of the things that I have to do is I'm taking responsibility for what happened, and I take responsibility for fixing it in this action. And part of every level of government and service is thinking not only about the future of the city of Chicago, doing the things necessary and making sure that you're held accountable for the results. And so I will be judged by that, as I was for the last 4 years and for the next 4 years, to make sure I do what's necessary and important for the city's future. Fran?
Mr. Mayor, if you want to establish credibility and trust, why not fire the officers who falsified their reports? Why not fire the cops who you've been waiting years, literally, to take action against? Why not do something?
Well, it's funny for you to well, you're asking on a day in which I'm brought in. One is we have a new superintendent. We have a new head of IPRA. There is an investigation right now going on by the U.S. Attorney on the event and all the parties involved as it relates to Laquan McDonald. When I'm given the chance and the material, I will take action and then make things right if they're wrong and hold people accountable for that, correct?
Where are those officers now? Where are those officers serving now?
You say that you welcome this new investigation by the Civil Rights Division of Justice. Will you promise here today that whenever they finish their work and they come up with their list of changes and recommendations, that you will implement them? You won't go to court, you won't fight about it, you won't turn loose the lawyers, but you'll say yes and do it.
Yeah, I think, well, 2 things I would say to you. First, we're already getting to work, both with from dashboard to body cams to new leadership at IPRA in the search for a new police superintendent, a permanent one. Also the task force and with the people with both the reputation and their body of work in the area of oversight and accountability. But I would draw your attention, Greg, to one other issue. It was also when there was federal oversight of our hiring practices called the Shackman Decree that had existed for years. It was my administration that brought that, not only that practice of federal oversight of our hiring to an end, because the judge believed we had recognized for the first time the hiring in the city of Chicago, and not only did it for the city of Chicago, the sister agencies, and the city council. And so my past record of cooperating and implementing the necessary reforms, putting in place the necessary structures and practices and policies exist. And I will be held accountable to ensure that this work is done. And I will say, and I want to be clear, as you know, in Chicago, this is not the first police shooting of a citizen. It is also my administration, while it didn't happen under my watch, resolved the Burge cases in the sense of making the family whole. It is my administration that also dealt with the Shackman decree and ending federal oversight of our hiring. The work of making reforms is a long road, but I have stuck with it in both cases in situations that were not of my tenure, but I wanted to get Chicago on a new start and a fresh start. And why I say I welcome it and accept it is because, and I also told the police department and the leadership today, I not only welcome and accept it, we need it. We need a third party in this city, because in the past instances, whether it was the 07 situation or the instances before, we've never, as a city, measured up with the changes on a sustained basis to finally deal in whole cloth with that situation. And so you have my commitment and every fiber of my body to not only work with the Justice Department in the sense of cooperative efforts, but then use all my energy to bring that level of reform and change. I will, one word, Greg, an additional word, is I am not going to wait only, because their work in the preliminary level may take months. I don't know what the time frame is. And I don't think Chicago, as it relates to police and community relations, has time. So we are going to take steps, and why I'm very anxious also, Bill, I see you, why I'm very anxious to see the work from the task force will also give us a series of steps that are necessary to implement and to build that trust. Bill, then Marianne.
Mayor, less than 2 weeks ago, right before you released the McDonald video, you were standing behind your police superintendent. You even held up IPRA as one of the safeguards, the oversight to deal with police shootings. Today, you fired the chief of IPRA. Your superintendent's no longer around. Explain why you've been so reactive instead of proactive in dealing with these issues.
Well, I think that we have a series of steps that we have to take that I believe that are necessary for the trust. I started a conversation on each of those cases. I can explain individually them, but I think the basic point, Bill, and I think the essential point is establishing and taking steps necessary to build a level of trust that this is not going to be just another moment, another incident, and do some, I don't mean that past were like this, but a half-baked effort of reforms that do not meet the challenges. I'm going to make the decisions that are necessary. When they're tough, they're going to be done. To face up to the challenge, find a set of policies and practices that are necessary to measure up to the challenge we face as a city, and that's why we've taken the steps.
When did you realize the full bake was necessary?
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Can we get your reaction to Cook County State's Attorney Alvarez not charging the police officer in the Ronald Johnson case? Did you see that video?
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts?
I saw that video today. Obviously, it's saddened every time there's a loss of life. But as you know, while her work, the state's attorney, ends, IPRA's work as it relates to disciplinary action and in their investigatory work begins today, which is why it's also essential that you have new leadership at that office. Paris?
Do you agree with the charges? Do you agree not to charge?
That's, as I think, Marianne, the best thing I can say to you is what I just said, which is, look, you have the loss of life. Anytime that happens, you have to take a step back. I would say that she walked through the entire case why she made her decision. That doesn't mean we're absolved, and that's why IPRA now has to start their investigation from a disciplinary action of the other officers.
Superintendent Escalante, again, when you saw the McDonald video, did you not, at least in your head, conclude that the police statements from that night were false?
Well, I got to go back to, maybe I didn't do a good enough job of clarifying the cleared closed question. That report that you're referring to is the total criminal part of the investigation, going back to the criminal trespass to the trucking yard, the damage to the squad car, the puncturing of the tire, the damage to the windshield, the threatening the other two officers prior to that. That's where the video supports the cleared closed. When the video was first seen, Superintendent McCarthy at the time did the most that he was able to do, and he immediately stripped Officer Van Dyke and had him assigned to administrative duties.
Superintendent, where are the other officers now? Superintendent, where are the other officers now? Superintendent, where are the other officers now? Are they on the street?